Hey everyone, Kristen here. Please join me in wishing a very happy birthday to the founder of the Straight Spouse Network, our own Amity Pierce Buxton. Amity is turning 90 on February 20th. That's right, 90. And she is still fierce and fighting for all of us to have a voice and share our stories. We know many of you will want to celebrate Amity's special day, but Amity asked that no gifts be sent to her. Instead, she requested that any and all commemorations be sent in the form of donations to the Straight Spouse Network General Fund. If you would like to say happy birthday and thank you to Amity, please consider donating. Go to straightspouse.org and click on Ways to Give. And now, on with the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Straight Spouse Network podcast, Straight Spouse Voices. I'm your host, Kristen Kelbley, and I was a straight spouse. Our guest today is Jill Smokler. Jill is a noted entrepreneur, social influencer, New York Times best-selling author, and community builder. The founder of Scary Mommy, Jill has spent the last 10 years creating and curating online content for parents, having grown her one-time mommy blog into one of the most influential digital parenting properties in the world. Jill is also a recognized thought leader who frequently speaks at women-centric events, conferences, and on air. In 2017, Forbes magazine named Jill a top 10 parenting influencer, and she is also a straight spouse. Jill, welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, I know our listeners are going to be so excited to hear this show today. I have to say, I don't have kids, so I had heard the term scary mommy before, but I didn't know anything about you, to be honest, until a friend of mine posted in one of our online straight spouse groups a blog post that you had put up, I think in August of 2018, where you were talking about your experience being a straight spouse, that you were a year and change out from having announced that your soon-to-be ex-husband was gay and that the two of you would be separating, and you kind of talked about how things were going for you. And that was how I learned about who you are and what you've done with your career and your life. And I said, I got to see if I can get her on the show.
And here I am.
and I'm so glad you said yes. So thank you for being here.
You are welcome.
For those of us who aren't parents and who weren't sure who Scary Mommy was and who Jill Smokler is, would you tell us a little bit about your business background?
Sure. My business background started really accidentally 10 years ago when I was home on maternity leave with my newborn son and then my two older kids who were almost 2 and almost 4. And I was really just looking for an outlet, for something to do with my time that wasn't involving diapers and bottles and all that stuff. So I started a blog and named it Scary Mommy because my son had recently referred to me like that. And I just thought it was really funny and a perfect blog. Right. And it was, it was available. So I snagged it. And for a couple of months, I just sort of innocently shared pictures and wrote little accompanying words and stories. And it just gradually took off and seemed to really resonate with people. Back then, social media was very different. We weren't all on Facebook. There wasn't Instagram. And people were really just blogging about crafts and recipes and, perfect looking family photos and that sort of stuff. And that was not my life. It's still not my life. And, even if I tried to make that look like my life, I would not be able to. So I just was sharing, the reality of what I was going through, and people really connected to it.
Right, because there was a sense of imperfection and the humanity of your experience as a mom and the mess of it and the chaos of it, rather than the sort of curated perfection that, people think being a mom maybe should be, and that it's very much not.
Exactly. And it's comforting when you find, and I found that comfort as well when people would comment on my blog and leave links to their blogs. The first time I remember I read a comment from somebody I didn't know, and I thought it was so strange. I was like, why is this person commenting on my life? Who are they? This is really sketchy. And I had no idea that it was a whole community and you could really form these relationships with people you've never met in real life. And then once I realized that, I was totally hooked.
Wow. Well, let me tell you, I can relate to the sense of community with people that you've never met in your life.
Absolutely.
Over a different circumstance, which is the straight spouse circumstance. So we've come to the part in the show where I invite you to tell us your straight spouse story, your particular narrative of how you came to find out that your husband, Jeff, who is soon to be your ex-husband, I believe, is gay, and the two of you decided to separate. So would you share your story with us, Jill?
I will. So we were college sweethearts. We met in August, like before, the first week of orientation. And from that point on, we're a couple for 4 years throughout college. We moved in together immediately after, got engaged shortly thereafter, and got married. About a year into the marriage, Jeff expressed that he was experiencing a little confusion about his sexuality, but that it was really confusion because we were really in love and happy, but he also felt like there might be another side to him, but it certainly wasn't all of him. And I think he was very confused, as was I. I mean, it felt like the rug was just being ripped out of everything I could stand on. But we sort of decided at that point, I really couldn't, and this was pre-kids, but I couldn't fathom life without him. And I didn't want to. He was my best friend. He was the person I had the most fun with. And I loved him. And he was a person I had chosen to and I wanted to be with. So it just sort of became a part of our life that started out as just a small fraction. And I think as time went by, Jeff became more and more confident about who he was and how, our marriage didn't really fit into that arrangement anymore. But it was sort of something that ebbed and flowed and would become a primary issue at certain times. And then when we had little kids or when I was traveling a lot for work or when there were other things going on, it really wasn't front and focal. But it was certainly something that I carried the weight of for a long, long time, as did he.
Right. I think that you point to an interesting dynamic for straight spouses, and thank you for sharing that. Last episode, we had Dina Matos on, the former First Lady of the state of New Jersey, whose husband, Jim McGreevey, came out in a press conference. In her scenario, she never had an inkling that he was gay or same-sex attracted. And then your story mirrors a lot of other straight spouses as well, where there is some confusion around the sexuality. There is some maybe information, but sometimes the gay spouse says, but I love my wife and I'm sexually attracted to her and we have a sex life. And so I thought I am straight or I can do this marriage. And so the same-sex attraction becomes kind of like a background piece in the marriage. Is that kind of how it felt for you? Like kind of it was always there? Yeah.
Yeah, that is exactly how it felt, that it was something that was there, but it was in the background and it would fizzle up, occasionally. But for the most part, it was just something that we sort of, I was aware of, but it felt like everything else was working so well. And when I had little kids, I couldn't imagine breaking up our family and dealing with two different houses and co-parenting. It just felt like an impossibility at that point. And yeah, we just sort of handled it between the two of us and didn't let anybody else into that little circle, which is the one part that I really do regret.
So it was very isolating to kind of keep that under wraps.
Oh, it was absolutely. But I knew I felt like I couldn't. And I was seeing a therapist at this point and not addressing this in therapy, which in retrospect was absurdly ridiculous. But I felt like once I really vocalized it, then we would need to separate. And I just was not ready for that. So I just felt like this is a burden that I have to bear until it becomes unbearable, which it didn't feel like it did for a while. And then all of a sudden it did.
I think you point to such a common experience of the first the isolation that this kind of throws couples in when they're in mixed orientation marriages, whether they're both aware of the situation or not. It's almost like there's an embargo on being able to tell anybody who would even understand or believe it. Yeah. That's a difficult and scary and traumatic sometimes place to be. And then also like what you said about voicing it makes it really real. And when you're just not in a place where you're ready to address, because if you voice it and it becomes real, then something has to change. Right. And if you're not ready for it to change, that can be a really, really daunting thing to look at and stare at in the mirror of the Absolutely. Marriage. Yeah.
Yeah. And when it was just, it felt easier when it was sort of just the two of us that, we had this thing and nobody else impacted it nobody knew for, until we announced our separation. But when we would go out on double dates or socialize in settings where everybody was a couple, that was the hardest part for me because I felt like we were really putting on this act that I didn't feel like when we were a family or when we were around family or in other situations, but something about being with other couples really just made me feel like we were so different and we were, we just did not fit in and it felt very lonely.
Oh. And so, Jill, what happened then to bring you to this point, to the point where you all are divorce pending, but what brought you to the point of deciding to end the marriage?
I think something just clicked where I could see a path of separation and actually going forward together when the kids were little and it was so physically demanding and it was really, the two of us were outnumbered by three of them. And it felt like when I was alone with them, there weren't enough hands. I only had two hands. There were three of them. And it just all felt too difficult and impractical. And when they got older, they were, they're 11, 13, and 15 now. And I can't even do the math in my head to figure out exactly where they were, but they were old enough where I felt like it didn't feel so out of control. And one day something just clicked and I felt like that was the time. And I confronted Jeff about it. And from that point, things happened very, very quickly. I feel like we had sort of been subconsciously saving up for that moment. So once I put it out there, we just got really into action mode.
Got it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I think that is also sort of a common and critical moment for straight spouses and their LGBT partners is that there does come a moment where you can see a path forward after divorce that makes it less daunting and less terrifying, actually, to be able to move forward with kind of envisioning a new future and envisioning a different kind of family, whereas before, for whatever reasons, and that is a huge amount of pressure to not want to break up a family. I mean, I see this with straight spouses all the time, the pressure around, oh God, how will this impact our children if we stay together? How will this impact our children if we don't? Those are huge, huge considerations.
It was a huge consideration. And in the year or so that followed, it was really difficult because I felt like when this ends, at least, the kids will see me being this happy person and they, maybe they've sensed that I wasn't happy before and that things just felt heavy. And once we separate, I'll be able to be light and just have, an air about me that they didn't know. And that really didn't happen at all in the aftermath of the split. Was really, really difficult. And for the first year I thought, was this the right thing? Was this worth uprooting everybody for? Is this, I'm not having fun. And I thought it would be so fun to be single. I thought, the whole world would open up, and it didn't quite happen like that.
Right. It's not a magic bullet and it doesn't happen instantly. I thought the same thing too, just not having kids, but getting divorced. I thought, God, the instant the divorce papers are signed, I will explode into enlightenment and I'll have this amazing life and my career will fall into place and everything will be amazing. And no, it didn't go like that at all. It was quite a long haul to recover from all of that. Well, we're going to take a quick break, Jill. And then when we come back, we're going to talk to Scary Mommy about how to tell the kids, because that is something I think you're uniquely able to talk about. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Jill Smokler. Hey, everyone. We want to thank you for tuning in to the Straight Spouse Voices podcast today. If you think we're doing good work and you want to hear more straight spouse stories, we need you to do us a solid. Leave us a review or rate us with lots of stars on your podcast app. Or tell one friend about our show so they can tune in too. The more people who listen, the more we can keep this thing going. And finally, if this podcast has been helpful to you, please consider donating to help keep us on the air. You can show us the money at weblink.donorperfect.com/voices. And thank you for your support. And we're back with Jill Smokler. And Jill, so when we were talking before about what we might talk about today on the episode, and we were kind of shooting ideas around what our focus could be. And then it was like, you said, well, we can talk about how to tell the kids. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have Scary Mommy on the show. Of course.
Well, let me back up a second. It wasn't exactly how to tell the kids. It was my experience with telling them, because I don't feel like I would not want to write a guidebook on how to tell your kids.
Well, that's true. That's true. How you told your kids. Right. Absolutely. You know, I was doing a little bit of research on it. And one of the things that I think was so impressive about your journey, and I will let you describe it and talk about it, but that you and your husband, Jeff, approached it with such honesty and transparency. So Jill, how did you and Jeff decide to tell the kids?
We decided to tell my daughter, who was 13 at the time, separately the same day, but we wanted to talk to her first. The boys were a little younger. They were 9 and 11, and we felt like maturity-wise, she was the one who might need more explanation. So I think it was a Saturday, and we brought her into our room, and we just all sat down in the bed and said, we have something we need to talk to you about. And the way we approached it was sort of one string of a sentence that was, Daddy is gay and we're getting divorced. It wasn't two separate thoughts. We just sort of put it in the context of, he is gay and we're getting divorced. And that is the primary reason. But, we love you so much. And that is what is going to dictate everything from this point forward. We talked about what good friends we've always been and how that would go forward, and just asked if she had any questions, which she really didn't. And she didn't want to talk about it for very long. The first thing she said, actually, after we told her, was she gave Jeff a big hug and said, I love you so much, which was so amazing and showed such maturity and compassion. We were so proud of her for that.
Right.
And then she just wanted to go and be by herself in her room, which we let her do. And then we told the boys, and they were shocked. My little one, Evan, thought it was a joke. My middle he tends to shut down when he's not, doesn't want to deal with something. And he just got very, very quiet and sullen. And we reiterated the same things, that we love each other, that we love them, and that we would be a different sort of family, but still a family unit. And my middle sort of thought that. He kept saying, no, you won't be. You won't have a relationship. You're getting divorced. You won't be anything. And that was something that we really had to show him through experience. And I think now, the kids don't have any question about the relationship that we have. It's certainly complicated and imperfect, but we have a very strong foundation, and we love one another, very much. And we will always put the kids first. We tried to explain from the get-go, and it wasn't easy. And looking back, we moved more quickly than I would recommend or do if I had to do it again. Jeff moved out pretty quickly after we told them, because it had been something we had been preparing for about 6 months. So I think we were a little overzealous when we finally told them, and we should have done it in a more, more thoughtful, slow way. But it was a tough day. It was a tough week. It was a tough month, and it was not easy. But I think they're in reasonably good places right now, and I think they certainly feel loved by both of us, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, I was going to ask how they are doing with it now.
They're really good now. It's funny. I was shopping with my daughter this weekend. It was her birthday, and I took her to DC, and we were in Urban Outfitters, and they had all of this all of these shirts and sweatshirts that had little rainbow motifs going on. And we both looked at them and picked them up. And I remember my thought process was, this is so cute, but I don't, as LGBT friendly as I am, I just don't feel like announcing it. And Lily picked up a shirt and she was like, I like this, but I don't want everybody to think everything I wear is about daddy.
Right.
I totally get that. Rainbows don't look the same to me. And I'm so, proud of that community and passionate about it, but I don't want that to be apparent on all of my clothing choices all the time.
Right.
So that just made me laugh that we were sort of in the same boat.
Right.
It's hard for them when they hear words like gay being thrown about in a negative way. And Lily has talked about her desire to sort of speak up and say, you shouldn't use that term like that. My dad is gay and there's nothing wrong with it. It's not a negative thing. And then just sort of wanting to fit in and let things go because she doesn't want to make a fuss or confrontation. It's not necessary. So I think that's the toughest part.
Yeah, the kids have their own journey around this announcement and this disclosure. I would imagine, not having kids of my own, I would imagine that sometimes the best thing that you have is to simply listen when they talk about these issues, because we can't protect them and fix everything for them as they go through this.
Absolutely. And it's certainly not over. It's not like I can tie that up with a bow and say these conversations are done and, now we can go on with our lives. It's something that's, continuously evolving, and they have questions. And as time goes by, as we start dating people, it's never a conversation that we can put an end period to, which is fine. So I think as long as we stay open in our communications and willing to answer whatever questions, be a sounding board, just make them feel like there's nothing they can't ask or anything that is off limit. That's been our approach.
I love that, because for the straight spouses who are listening, who are parents of young kids or teenagers or even older kids, these conversations are ongoing. This is a dialogue that will continue for as long as they need it to continue. And then there's nothing that they can't ask. I love that approach, because I think that there are straight spouses out there who are grappling with, how do I tell the kids, and what if their reactions are negative or painful, or whenever we have to disclose something, no matter what it is, there's always the fear that leads up to it is worse than the actual disclosure of what we have to communicate to our loved ones. And I love that you guys, when I was reading about you approaching your kids about this, I was reading in an article that you guys thought that honesty and transparency and simplicity basically was the route that you were going to go. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, it really, at the beginning, seemed really basic. It was that we love each other, but daddy has feelings that don't make this marriage work. And just because we love each other and we're a family, we just tried to focus on how much we loved them and how intact we could be in so many ways, even when we weren't living together. But it's hard. It's so hard when you see your children in any sort of pain and to feel like you are the cause of that. And there's really no way that you can comfort them. There are no answers. They're going to be hurt by this.
Right.
It's devastating. It's so hard to see.
One of the things that you say is that they will be hurt, that is in a large part unavoidable. And as hard and difficult and tragic as that is, it is part of this process.
It is absolutely part of the process. It is excruciatingly hard to be the cause of your child suffering in any way. But that said, I think this whole experience has really helped them become more sensitive to other people, more empathetic, more, just understanding of struggles that everybody goes through, and self-confidence, self-awareness. And I hope that they'll be able to, if, whether they're gay, whether they're straight, whatever they decide to be in the future, I hope they're able to accept it and, just feel confident in whoever and whatever they evolve into.
That's so beautiful, because I feel like to say that there's a silver lining is a bit pat and sort of cliched, but I do love that you are able to see in them, as they respond to this, the growth in compassion and empathy and sensitivity, like that this is a formative part of their lives, but it doesn't necessarily have to be entirely a negative formative part of their lives. This can actually deepen people as kids, and as they grow up and observe the world, this can deepen their understanding of other people around them. And that is, I think, ultimately an amazing thing to come out of this.
Absolutely. And something that really was heartwarming about the whole experience was we had sent out an email as soon as we told the kids to all of our family, to friends of the family, to parents of the kids' friends, just sort of, informing them and letting them know. So the kids didn't come home with questions, and just so, everything was very transparent. And we expected that the parents would respond very kindly and maturely, but I didn't expect the kids to as much. The kids' friends, all of them, were so supportive and loving and kind. And the fact that Jeff was gay was really the part of the story that impacted them the least. They didn't even blink at that. It was that Jeff was moving out of the house and the kids were going to have both of us in one house. And it was really amazing to see that response and how much has changed from when Jeff was a kid and felt like that was something that, was just off limits and wasn't even in the scope of his reality that he could ever, maybe be gay. It was just something that, he thought he had to shut off and went forward with his life. And I think the generation now is so different than that and so accepting. It's not a taboo the way it was. And we are not the only couple that they know who've ended like this. So,
right.
That's definitely a positive.
Yeah. And that ultimately bodes well for the future. I think that the more we are able to be accepting and understanding and embracing of all of the myriad tapestry of human sexuality, the fewer mixed orientation marriages will result. Well, Jill, we're going to take another quick break. And when we get back, I want to bring it back around to you. And I want to focus on a couple things that you had said in that blog post that initially sort of acquainted me with you and your work, because I think that the straight spouses who are listening will be very interested to hear a couple of things that you wrote about in that post. So we'll take another quick break and we'll be right back with more Jill Smokler. Hey everyone, the Straight Spouse Network is here for you, providing real support at an unreal time from peers who have walked in your shoes and understand. If you need help, check out straightspouse.org. On our website, you'll find resources, reading material, an open discussion forum, links to the podcast, and more. Reach out. We're here. straightspouse.org. And we're back with Jill Smokler, the founder of Scary Mommy. And Jill, that initial blog post that you released on August 29th of 2018, you had said a couple things in there that I thought were just absolutely fantastic things to say to other people who are going through this. And you had mentioned in that post that when you initially announced that you and Jeff were going to be getting a divorce and that Jeff was coming out as gay, that you got a flood of emails and responses. And I wanted to ask what was the nature of those emails and responses and outreach that you got from people?
There was no negative sort of response. Everybody who responded was so kind and generous and thoughtful. There were so many people in similar situations, so many people who had gone through what I had gone through, and so many people who were in that space now. Right. And that was, it was very comforting to know. It was very sad. It made me very, very sad that I didn't know that when I was still in the marriage, because I felt like I was the only person in the world who knew this exact type of pain and this exact experience. But the response definitely showed me that I am far from alone and that this impacts so many more people than I could have imagined.
Oh, I know. I mean, we're out there.
Oh yeah, it's a club. We just don't talk about the membership.
It's a club. We just don't talk about the membership, which is why hopefully with this podcast, we're changing that a little bit, that we're starting this dialogue that as more and more people come out of the closet as lesbian and gay and bi and trans, there are going to be straight people who were in marriages with them who are processing that experience. And sometimes there's a lot of anger and frustration and confusion. And sometimes there's beautiful new families that can result. I mean, there's just no roadmap through this. Every relationship is completely different. And yet there are similarities. And one of the things that you had said was in your blog post, you said it's not your fault. You were addressing the people who had reached out to you who had said they're going through something similar. They are going through it. They have gone through it. And you'd said, I don't have much to offer everybody at the moment, but what I do have to offer is it's not your fault. And you said, I hesitate to even say that because of course it's not your fault, but being told your spouse is gay is a total mind fuck. So you might need to hear it. This isn't your fault. You did nothing wrong, and this isn't about you. Mindfuck is the word that we use. It can be a total mindfuck, and in different ways for different straight spouses. But I wanted to just ask, how has it been psychologically tricky for you?
Oof.
Yeah, big question.
Yeah, that is the word for it, because it's so complex and it does a number on you in so many different ways. And I think as Jeff was confused about how he could love me and be attracted to me while also having these other feelings, I felt similarly. And I had so many different emotions. I was so angry and hurt and disappointed, but I was also proud of him for, finally recognizing who he was and having the strength to do that. And it was just this very odd, just combination of sort of everything I'd ever felt busting into one total mindfuck.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to process.
That is so true. It is so much to process. And the other thing I wanted to ask you is, do you feel like you have to tidy up your anger at all because you're a public figure? Do you feel like that's one thing that you are free to express, or do you feel like you have to kind of process that quietly, privately, not let people know that maybe you've been a little bit angry about what's happened? How does that work for you?
It's something I wouldn't have probably been as vocal about at the beginning because everything felt so new and for the kids and especially with the kids, that they didn't know if we were actually telling the truth, that we could still maintain some sort of relationship. So I really wanted to, at that point, focus on the positive and the silver lining of it all. I think as time has gone by and we've had more conversations with them, they're a little more clued in as to how complicated it is, and that I can feel angry while at the same time feeling love and compassion. So I'm definitely more willing to expose that side of things. It's hard because you don't want one feeling to completely negate the other. Right. And it's hard as a child to understand that. But, we feel it all.
Right.
Definitely.
We feel it all. That's the thing. I think people who haven't gone through this don't necessarily understand just how complex the situation
all
is.
All the feelings.
It's all the feelings. Like,
absolutely.
It's every single one of them and then some, and magnified to about, the power of 10 or whatever. I'm not a mathematician, but it's a lot. Exactly. The power of infinity. Thank you. It's a lot to have to go through and process. And what you feel from one day to the next is not necessarily consistent or the same for quite a while afterwards, until there's a new normal that's established. And that's one of the things that you also wrote in your blog post. You said, no, this isn't easier than a normal marriage ending. You said, I can't tell you how many times people tried to comfort me with, at least it wasn't you, like that made the situation any easier. With a gay spouse, you're not only mourning the end of your marriage, at least as you knew it before, but also the end of the person you love, at least as you loved them before. I won't say it's harder than any other marriage, but it sure as hell isn't any easier. I love that.
That was something that really drove me crazy in the aftermath of the announcement, was how many people said that. Like it would, it was just supposed to make me feel so much better. Well, at least he wasn't, looking for another woman. Right. At least he was out, at some strip club. At least it wasn't this, that, or the other thing. It's like, how does that make any sense?
Right.
I mean, it's, loss and pain and, those feelings, it's not any different. And it's also, like I said, I wouldn't venture to say it's harder. it's so complicated, and it's so hard to, when you are someone who doesn't question or struggle with their sexuality, it's very hard to understand why somebody can't just compartmentalize that and close it off and move forward. That was something that I struggled with, was why can't you, I want to eat an ice cream sundae every day for breakfast. I don't do it. I want to, just off and go shopping in the middle of the day when I'm working, and I don't do that. Why can't you just not want to have sex with men?
Right.
So that was, that was something that I really could not grasp.
I've heard that a lot. That was not my particular reaction to my spouse, but that is a reaction. Why can't you just put this aside? Let's continue to be a family. I love our life. We love our kids. We have a great time. We're best friends. Why do you have to blow up everything for your sexuality? And so you would certainly not be the first person to articulate that initial reaction.
Yeah. No, that was my feeling for a long time. It was just, this should be something that for me, for the kids, just rise above it, get over it.
Right.
In the days since, it's very clear to see how much Jeff was struggling at that point, which I think I was aware that things weren't easy, but I don't think I realized how tormented he was. Right. So certainly for his mental health, for his physical health, for everything, I think it's wonderful that he can live as the person that he is. But yeah, it's tough. It was tough to be on that end.
Right. To me, over here, it points to the importance of authenticity for everyone, being able and free to live as we authentically are and understand ourselves to be from as early as possible. And that way, hopefully, fewer people will end up sitting in this seat hosting a podcast about being a straight spouse.
Absolutely. And I do feel very optimistic about forthcoming generations. And
I do too.
My kids are, I think that's only going to be something that gets better with time, thankfully.
I agree with you 100%. There is cause for optimism. And I think this younger generation is going to usher in a more open and accepting and understanding way of looking at the world and way of looking at people. And the rigidness is not going to be quite so oppressive. Let's hope anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, they may be dealing with, global warming and crazy temperatures and whatever else, but hopefully in terms of sexuality, we've set them up for more success than
we've experienced. I think you're right. They've got other problems to be looking at.
Exactly. We'll take this one off the table, I hope.
Yeah. Well, Jill, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And I just wanted to kind of open it up and see if there was anything else you wanted to communicate to our listeners and see what's next for you, because you've left Scary Mommy and you're kind of waiting to see what the next chapter brings.
Yeah, well, I am so envious, Kristen, that the listeners are listening to this and to the other podcasts and a part of the Facebook community and reading posts, because that is what I wish I had before. So I think just the fact that they know they are not alone, I hope that makes things much easier and less lonely and isolating for them. And as far as me, I am still figuring that out. I miss the days where my kids didn't follow me on social media, where they didn't read everything I wrote and their friends' parents didn't. So I'm trying to figure out how to reconcile wanting to get back into the public eye and back into telling my story, because I would love to continue to, initiate these honest conversations and show the less than pretty side of life. But I'm trying to figure out how to do that while also being respectful of my kids and the fact that, our stories overlap a great deal and they are their own people. So I'll hope to figure that out eventually. I'll keep you posted.
Please do. And we wish you tremendous luck and good fortune as you navigate this next chapter and see what exciting things come your way. We're excited and grateful that you came on today to share with us. I know that this is going to help listeners, and thank you.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you to our listeners for joining us today. We're so glad to have you. If you'd like to leave feedback on this episode, you can do so by following the link in the podcast description. And remember, all comments are anonymous and moderated. And stay tuned for our March 1st episode. We interview British journalist Barclay Bram and Popo Fan a queer Chinese filmmaker on China's Tongqi. Tongqi are straight women in marriages to closeted gay men. In China, it is estimated that between 10 and 19 million women are unknowingly in mixed orientation marriages. So tune in to that episode to learn more about this phenomenon and what is being done to raise awareness of the Tongqi in China. Thanks to Brian Pickrell, my engineer, editor, and co-producer extraordinaire, for making me sound amazing. This is your host, Kristen, reminding you, until next time, keep using your voice.